Good evening, welcome to The Last Tackle, your one-stop shop for everything rugby league on a Wednesday night. Alongside me in the studio, Kyle Amor and Adrian Morley. And gents, just before we jump into what's been happening in this country, just very quickly, State of Origin this morning, don't know if you've seen it, but just a stat that I want to bring up. Queensland completed at 100% until the 69th minute, Kyle. Just how impressive is that?
Well, it's massive, especially in that occasion, in that arena. Incredible. And I think it was 20 points to nil at one point, wasn't it? And when you're completing high like that and you're doing the other side of the game pretty well, then it usually does lead in a heavy score lead, and that was the case, and they managed to hang on, and secure the series, as they say, Moz.
Yeah. I think that's probably the highest level of competition in rugby league. I think that eclipses internationals as well. I just think it's an incredible series. It never fails to live up to the expectations. And I know when I lived over there, I couldn't wait to go to watch them games live. But absolutely fantastic game and incredible start. And Queensland never write the Queenslanders off. And they've come good again, and you'll have to wait till next year, New South Wales, to get their revenge.
You say it's the highest standard in rugby league. I'd go one further and suggest that I don't think there's an equivalent in any team sport that has something as high a standard as that.
No, I'd agree with you there, Lewis. It's been around for, I think 1980 was the first one, and 45 years, and again, you can count on one hand the amount of dud games, always. Doesn't do anything other than entertain.
Right, let's turn our attentions then back to the Betfred Super League, and only one place to start. Kyle, we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago where I suggested perhaps Castleford were improving. You said we'll have this conversation in a couple of weeks' time. Danny McGuire sacked by Cass, rightly or wrongly, go on.
Look, you never want to see people get sacked, do you? So, without trying to avoid the question, the club have decided that it is the right time to move him on. That loss against Huddersfield was probably just too much for Martin Jepson, and the club have decided to go into another direction. I think what's more interesting for me, Lewis, is the fact or the part that, or the role maybe, that Chris Chester has been given in the recent weeks. Every time Cass have been on TV, you pan to Danny McGuire and Brett Delaney, and the director of football sat right next to them, and you just wonder how much of, or what's been going on behind the scenes, really. But they've decided to part company with Danny McGuire. Chris Chester obviously take over as interim until they can find out who the next replacement is, or where they move forward at. It's unfortunate for Danny, wonderful player, great assistant at OKR, has dipped his toe in at Castleford and came up short, so I'm sure he'll come back though.
Yeah, I think it's the wrong decision, personally. I just think for the squad he's got, if you look at the Castleford Tigers squad, there's no superstars. Danny is a relatively inexperienced coach, and I don't know what he was expected to do with that team. I think they have improved, particularly recently, and I think they're going in the right direction, so I disagree with the sacking, but ultimately it's a results-driven sport, and if the Castleford club feel that's the way to go, then that's the way to go. But I do feel for Danny, and I hope he gets another gig in rugby league.
I think as well it highlights, like what Moz said, with the playing group they've got, that roster is, who put that roster together. If Danny had a large part in that, then ultimately he has to make that work. If he didn't, then it's even more of a difficult task. So, there's an awful lot that goes into a squad of rugby league, isn't there? It's not just a case of, but again, it's usually the case, it's a lot easier to get rid of one bloke than it is to turn 30 around, and that does take a bit of time, and they've a knee-jerk reaction maybe to that Huddersfield loss, but they've put the hammer down, and we move on.
I always think when these decisions get made, there's an interesting dynamic to this, which is just about how much time clubs are willing to afford coaches and squads. I know neither of you spent any particular length of time at clubs that were down the bottom or struggling, but did it feel like, watching from the outside, looking in, Carl, did you feel like Danny McGuire was on the road to turning things around at Cass, on the road to improvement, or did it just feel like dud after dud in terms of those performances?
I think Danny said it in an interview. It's one step forward and 75 back, and Danny was quite emotive in a lot of his interviews as well, which I thought was quite refreshing to see. But there is a balance there as well. But I think the writing was on the wall. You go back to the Bradford game in the Challenge Cup, and I think the writing was on the wall then. The players, the most of that playing group just aren't up to the standard of competing week in, week out at Super League, and I think it's as black and white as that, really.
Do you think, if Wayne Bennett took over, the best coach in the world could get any more out of that squad?
That's a great question, Moz. It is. I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure, if I'm honest. I think there's certain levels of performance that you have to be at. It's okay just being a part of Super League, but all the clubs in Super League, they want to be trying to challenge and move up the table. And for a couple of years now, Cass have just looked where they are.
The interesting thing with this as well, and I haven't got my IMG calculator out. I don't know where we sit in terms of points at this time of the year, and who might be up and who might be down. All sorts of talk about 14 teams and all this kind of thing was. But I think Cass will be a Super League club next season. When you look at what's going on in and around them, was there not a case of saying, well, let's get to the end of the year and reassess? They're not going to make the playoffs one way or the other this year.
Yeah, well, that was my thoughts. I did think it was uncalled for. The second out, I would have given a bit more time. As you say, if they've got that security, why not wait till the end of the year and then reassess them? But they have made the decision now, and then it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Chris Chester. Whether he carries on to the end of the year or they get someone in soon rather than later.
Rumour mill straight into full swing as soon as the announcement was made, Kyle. Plenty of names being mentioned, but what kind of coach do they need? Do they need an established name who's been there and done it? They've gone down the kind of youthful coach route in terms of Danny McGuire. They tried a coach that was proven in Championship level with Craig Lingard the season before that. What profile do you think Castleford are one, looking at, and two, realistically going to get?
Again, you've just got to look at sort of what's out there, really. I mean, we were talking just before, and Ian Watson might be wanting to throw his name in the hat. Or they may look to go overseas and try a coach that's perhaps spent a little bit of time as an assistant in the NRL. It's worked so many times, hasn't it, for those assistants in the NRL coming over and then doing a wonderful job. They don't even necessarily have to win trophies. They can just see what the work they're doing and turning a culture around and getting a team to perform. Then opens up the door for them to progress later on in their career in the NRL. So, that's down to Chris Chester and the powers that be at Cass to go find a proven or a hidden gem.
Steve McNamara, that's an obvious one. Obviously, got relieved of his job at Catalan Dragons, but an ex-international coach, doing a fantastic job there at Catalan Dragons. He's a Yorkshire lad. I think that's a great fit if Steve McNamara wants to get back into coaching.
It's a brave decision, though, isn't it, to go to Castleford? Because if you get it wrong, where then do you go? It's a brave decision for whoever decides to take it on. But I mean, look what Darryl Powell did for 9 seasons there. He had a wonderful time, then got them playing in that way in 2017. It can be done, but they just need to find the right man.
The McNamara one's interesting because he was obviously heavily linked with the Leeds job not that long ago when Brad Arthur was talking about potentially taking the Perth job. There's kind of increasing whispers that Brad Arthur will still be at Leeds next season now, which obviously pushes McNamara out of the question if that is the case. We'll wait and see what happens at Cass. We'll move on to just having a look at last weekend's games and the result that sealed Danny's fate, that defeat to Huddersfield. Look, Cass undoubtedly poor in that game, Kyle, but we've said throughout the season on this show that if Luke Robinson can get players on the field, if he can get some level of consistency in his squad, he'll start to get more out of them. And I think, we are just starting to see evidence of that, aren't we? Yeah,
look, they had a blip over in Catalan, but aside that, the last 4 weeks, they've been good value for money and they've been good to watch as well. And, that trip down to south of France, I think it was 40-degree heat that day. So that can happen, and it has happened throughout, the time that Catalans have been a part of Super League. But Huddersfield have been improving a lot, and it didn't surprise me that they went there and won. But again, it just shows you to quote Danny McGuire again, the one step forward, 75 back. I mean, it was a really poor game, that, by the way. It wasn't a great watch, but Huddersfield, they managed to win it, and it won't bother them how that win came about. They just needed the win, and they'll move on.
I'll tell you what was a great watch, Friday night. We talk about kind of the big rivalries, the established ones, and I know Lee and Wigan is established in terms of a derby, but every time these two teams seem to play each other at the moment, we're just getting box office time and time again.
We do, and last week I said my favourite game of the year is the first game of the season, the 1-0 victory for Leigh. And I thought it can't live up to that expectations, but it did. I thought it was an absolutely fantastic game. Sell out at Leigh as well, which is fantastic for the club, fantastic for the sport, and it lived up to all the expectations. It was fantastic. They were worthy winners. They didn't just jag a win. Leigh were good for that win, and it's great that another team are in the mix there. And you know, when they get it right, they're a match for anyone, Leigh, and it was a tremendous game, tremendous victory.
You mentioned that 0-0 at the start of the season, Carl. That game almost felt like the reverse of that, in the sense that round one game was all defence, all physicality. This one was just chaos.
It was end to end, wasn't it? And you're right, there was chaotic periods in that, and there was some brilliant tries scored, and there was some good defensive displays as well. I thought Adam Kieran, the way he was throwing himself about, it was like a Moz back in his prime, you know, bending everybody every time they ran at him. But yeah, it was brilliant to see, and I think, you know, Moz touched up on there the sellout, and we talk a lot about Hull KR and the work they're doing off the field. Well, I think we have to tip our hat to Derek Beaumont again. You know, what he's been able to create there has been a brilliant place for you. You know, sat at home watching that game, wanting to be in that stadium. You know, it's fantastic, and another top game. You're right.
And just on that point, we'll go into it a little bit more depth later on. But if the regular season finished today and we had the top four that we've got now, say that top four was the semi-finals, my word, you'd have some atmospheres.
Yeah, without doubt. You know, Wigan, Hull KR, Leeds, be brilliant, wouldn't it?
Just moving on again, Friday, a strange game in a lot of senses. It feels like, from a Warrington perspective, beating Salford almost will feel like a sort of defeat. It's 2 points on the board, Moz, but it was scratchy.
It was. I went to this game, watched it live, and Sam Burgess was very disappointed with the performance. It's hard to get 2 points in Super League and be disappointed, but he was. Salford, on the other hand, were... it was a really spirited performance by Salford. It's probably the best they've played all year. We know what issues and problems they've got, but the boys had a dig on the field, and they got a standing ovation from the Salford faithful. But you know, it's still a defeat at the end of the day, and just because Salford don't get beat by 40 or 50, people are applauding, which is a terrible situation to be in. Flick back to Warrington, he'd be disappointed with the performance, but a win's a win, and I know Warrington have had a really tough time going to the AJ Bell Stadium in recent years. They've not had a win there for I think 3 or 4 years. So at the end of the day, they have got the win, and they just need to draw a line under it and crack on next week now.
Paul Rowley and Salford fans will have a look at that and go, well, Castleford next week, if they can find that
they'll be fancying that.
They'll be fancying it. As is ever the case with this, like, Salford or Devils Rubik's Cube that's going on, there's going to be more changes. Danny Richardson back to Hull KR. It looks like Ollie Russell coming in from Wakefield. But some much needed reason for some kind of measured optimism from Salford.
Yeah, look, and you know, I've not long been out of the game playing wise, a couple of years now, but you know, still speak to a lot of people who are still playing, and let me tell you, you know, from different teams, they say that Salford are getting better. They know that they're in a game for longer periods. I know the scoreline can still look like a blowout, but what some of the lads are saying is they're having to earn it now a little bit more, if that makes sense. So as long as, and I'm sure Paul Rowley's a master of bringing a team together and galvanising any positives he can out of it, I think they'll be licking the lips of an upset going to Castleford, but one that I think that everybody in the league wouldn't be too surprised if it happened.
On to Saturday, another win for St Helens. That kind of resurgence continues from their perspective, Carl. They're working their way back into contention and outside shot of the top four. Considering the conversations that were happening not that long ago, probably 2 months ago, the narrative all of a sudden feels very different for St Helens.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Famous man once said, "Never write off the Saints," didn't he? And they
trademark
you know, they look for St Helens. You know, it's all about from this period now, isn't it? The running, nothing's ever won prior to this. They just have to be in it. And yes, they've had some inconsistencies. They've had injuries like all clubs have, but they're just starting to just quietly just resurface away, and they'll be pretty happy with where they are now and looking forward rather than looking behind.
Moz, from an LFC perspective, the start of the season like a house on fire. It looked like it could be a really good year for them. They're still well in playoff contention, but is it just starting to feel like they might have to settle for a season of kind of steady improvement rather than genuine competitors?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think before a ball was kicked, Hull FC fans were the confidence was rock bottom, and I think this gave them a massive rejuvenation. They've probably got a bit too carried away with themselves with some of them victories earlier on, but the massive concern for me is their home form. They've not won there for a year, 12 months. Your home ground should be fortress. People should come and find it so hard to get a victory there, but they're just going and just taking the 2 points willy-nilly. So another tough loss, but I think overall it's been a very positive season, and there's still lots of time. But I'll go back to Saints. If you look at their squad, it's absolutely filled with superstars, and all you need to do is hit a bit of form at the right end of the season, and you could see another team go to Old Trafford.
We mentioned the job that Darryl did when he was at Wakefield of Castleford a few years ago. Sorry, now at Wakefield. I watched them a few times in Championship.
They're good to watch.
Carl. Second tackle out of yardage on their own 20, they're throwing edge plays, and you're going, well, you're not going to get away with that in the Super League.
Yeah.
Getting away with it. They're well in playoff contention.
Well, they're pulling teams apart with it, Lewis. I'd go one further than that. So, look, we reflect on Cass and their recruitment. Well, Wakefield recruited from the Championship, but they'd done a little bit of what Lee Leopards did. They recruited knowing that they were going to get back up, and when they got back up, they weren't just happy competing and scrapping around the foot of the ladder. They wanted to go and try and make an impression and an impact on it, and I think they've certainly done that. I think they're one of the most exciting teams to watch. They challenge you all over the field. Yes, they're going to have bumps in the road where they're going to, they're going to lose games that perhaps they feel they should have won. That's already happened this year. But again, I go back to, what an atmosphere it is when you go there. I've been there a couple of times working for Sky on the games, and it feels very much like it belongs back in Super League.
Unrecognisable.
It is. It's totally unrecognisable, and it's brilliant again for the competition. It's brilliant to see more that their attendance figures are up, and everything's looking good down at Bellevue.
Just on the style of football, Moz, we used to talk about Salford being kind of the great entertainers of the league and that willingness to throw the ball around. Wakefield have kind of stepped up to that mark this season, and I'm certainly not sitting here saying that Wakefield are going to be in the grand final in a few months' time or win the competition, but sport needs entertainers.
Yes, no, it does. And if you look at Wakefield as a club, as a whole, on the pitch, off the pitch, they've got it right, haven't they? And, teams who do throw the ball around, when the ball sticks, strange things can happen. So don't be surprised if they're a thorn in all the playoff contender sides. I think Darryl Powell's done an amazing job, and the club's going great. It's good to see.
Well, I'll tell you what, you just said there they might not be in the grand final. Well, this weekend's game against Hull FC feels. I only think there's only one space left in that. I think this could be a potential 4-point game with a view of just trying to nick that sixth place in the playoffs. It'd be massive game this weekend.
Talking about massive games, massive result. Leeds Rhinos have been building steadily. Had a blip against the Helens a few weeks ago, but huge progress. Moz, this was I'll talk about Cass 75 steps back. This felt like 10 steps forwards from Leeds in terms of that level of performance and that result against Hull KR team who've barely had a scratch against them all year.
Well, we were saying, Hull KR, who's going to stop them? Are they unbeatable? And the Leeds Rhinos proved that they are beatable, and to go to the home ground of Hull KR, which is particularly notoriously tough place to go and get the win and get the win in the manner they did, I think it's fantastic. It sends out a stark warning to the rest of the Super League that the Rhinos are back. They did have a little blip a few weeks ago against Saints, but I think is it 7 out of 8 wins now, something like that, and fantastic form, and it's good for the Super League to have a strong Leeds Rhinos team. It's great for the Super League, I think.
Well, they're going to meet each other for the third time this season. The Saints have come out on top twice, so you just want to, you wonder where they're at now. I think their Leeds Rhinos are in a completely different headspace. I know it was only a couple of weeks ago. I think they were about 60% completion. You talked about, Queensland, and their high completion throughout that game. 60% doesn't really give you a chance at any level, really. But what a game that is going to be. Never needs selling, does it? Leeds Rhinos, St Helens, and another cracker coming ahead.
Just before we look ahead to the games that are coming up, a milestone, some good news for the competition this week. 1 million aggregate fans through the turnstiles this season. Only the second time that's been reached in 100 fixtures or less in the 30 years of Super League. So a fascinating season that we keep talking about, Carl, and the fans are responding, and it's adding, isn't it? It's just adding to the product.
And you know what? When Sky announced that every game was going to be on, the biggest concern straight away was that means people aren't going to go, and it's just showed it's had the exact reverse effect. So, you know, credit to the powers that be at Sky. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm working for them, but you know, it is great. You know, we can now watch more games than ever, and it's not affecting any attendances. So the clubs are winning all round, the fans are winning all round, and you know, it's just great for the sport.
And it is credit as well. I mean, I don't want to dismiss the crowds and the achievements of the established clubs, Wigan's, St Helens, Leeds, but it is the achievement of the clubs that we've mentioned. Hull KR listing sellout after sellout, Mars Leeds filling that stadium, Wakefield pulling in more fans to Super League games than they have done in generations. It's that effort that's gone in off the field from those clubs that's got us to this point.
Matt's hugely, very much so. It's a credit to them clubs. Super League is booming, no matter what anyone says. It's fantastic, very rarely disappoints on the field, and that's relaying into the attendances, and fantastic. What a great Super League season it has been so far.
I saw Gary Schofield on Australian TV this week saying that Super League's a poor second to the NRL. Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that quality on the field is at the level that the NRL is at the moment, Kyle, but I do think, and that is what he was referencing, so I'm comparing apples and oranges here, but there's so much more to the on-field product, isn't there, to a competition and a game, and the atmospheres and the crowds at Super League is its USP as much as anything.
Well, look, I mean, obviously Moz has played on both sides of the world, so I mean, he'll probably be in a much better position to answer that, really. But knowing that the players I play with and the ones who come over, they love the atmosphere, they love the you know, they've all said to a man, really, that, you know, your sort of your top 4, top 6 is of an NRL kind of standard, you know. But there obviously is some catching up to do. But without sounding too negative, my only concern is if we open up this quota number that we have, that we're going to get more and more sort of New South Wales, Queensland Cup players coming over and basically taking away opportunities for young British players.
That's a huge debate, which I'm probably going to dodge on this show because we could be here for quite a long time talking about it. We'll see how that pans out, because there's arguments on both sides of that fence. I think fundamentally I agree with you, Moz, that it needs to be done in a way that's not taking opportunities away from English players coming through the system. But just back to our original kind of point about the crowds and the atmospheres that we've seen this season, all this talk about foreign investment and clubs partnering up with the NRL and all that kind of thing, TV deals that are coming up. We spend a lot of time bashing the product. Let's just talk about how good it is.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was playing in Australia, a lot of the Australian fans used to love watching the Super League. They said it's very different to the NRL. The NRL is very defensive based and focused, and I love watching it, don't get me wrong, but they love watching Super League because it's a different style of rugby league, and it's a lot more open, a lot more attacking, and it's just, you know, different games for different tastes. So it certainly has got a massive audience, massive reach, and we should be championing it. I agree with you.
Right, let's have a look at the menu then for round 18. Starts off Thursday night, and we've already touched on this game slightly, Carl. Hull FC versus Wakefield. Could be one that we look back on in 8 weeks, 9 weeks' time and go, season defining.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. You know, I'd labelled it earlier as a 4-pointer. You know, I'll still stand by that. On paper, it looks like it's going to be a real top quality game. Two teams that both like attacking. I think Wakefield probably edge it, given the way they are, given Hull FC's home record. But that's a real head scratch. I know we touched up on it earlier, but you've got to be able to win some games at home, haven't you? You know, it's crazy to think that where they are have come all from away victories, something that's normally so difficult to do.
Yeah.
But if they're gonna flip that, it has to be Thursday night. It has to be.
Will it be?
I don't think so. I just think Wakefield, the confidence is massive, and I think because they are playing at home, I think it does have an effect. You know, if you can imagine, if you keep losing, and then you're there again, think, oh, we're at home now, we're going to get beat again. So I think it does have a psychological effect. So I think because of that and the fact Wakefield are going so well, I think it'll be a Wakefield win.
On to Friday, wounded Wigan against the Huddersfield team, growing in confidence. As a neutral, I'm kind of hoping we might get a glimpse of Christian Wade in this game as well, his Super League debut. Wigan, unbeaten in the last 7 home meetings with Huddersfield, but they've been scratchy the last few weeks, Carl.
They have. It's not uncommon, you know, where you look back over the last 2 seasons, they do have this little mini blip in the season. It's usually from here where history has shown that they don't go on and lose after this. So, Huddersfield only a couple of weeks ago got their pockets pinched, didn't they? I think young Farriman scores in the corner, and so they'll be looking for revenge. But I keep saying it every week, I'm expecting Wigan just to bounce back with a ruthless performance, and it hasn't been coming. They've lacked a little bit of pace and a little bit of finesse, which is very unlike Wigan. But I think this week they get the job done.
So Bevan French, basically.
Bevan French. It's so important, isn't it?
Yeah,
you look at the numbers about the percentage when he doesn't play and they lose. It's quite alarming, really.
Yeah, best player in the competition by far. Isn't it?
He's a massive miss for them. There's no two ways about it. We'll move on to another game on Friday. Double header this, actually, men's and women's. St Helens and Leeds. That ended in a 20-all draw in the Women's Super League a few weeks ago when they met in round 1. So I think that 5:30 kickoff will be really interesting. The men's one, we've touched on this already. It's the kind of third trilogy fight. St Helens have had the rub on Leeds Rhinos in recent years, but 2 teams in very good form. Fascinating, this one was.
Yeah,
really
it's fascinating.
Good.
And if you look back in the history of Super League, these two, there's probably the best rivalry, playing in grand finals, that kind of thing. So it's going to be a fascinating contest. I just think the Leeds, the home advantage will be the defining factor. I think Saints are going to go there, give it their all. It's going to be close, competitive, but I just think the Rhinos are going to get there.
Moz, do you think Leeds will be eyeing up that second spot now?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, they've only had one loss in the last 7 or 8 games, as we've mentioned. So, confidence is high, and there's no reason why. If you keep winning, you just forget about everyone else. Just keep winning, keep picking up the 2 points. There's no reason why they can't get that second spot.
But it would be a big statement for Saints, wouldn't it?
It'd be huge.
This is... And then where's fans' opinion then on St Helens then following that, given what's been chucked at them? There's still loads of twists and turns, isn't there? It's great.
And just very quickly on the point you were just talking about, and I don't want to diminish the League Leaders Shield because I think we should talk it up more. It's the most consistent team across the season, but it's almost more significant, I think, finishing second rather than third than it is finishing first rather than second in some ways, because the way that the playoffs system.
You want the home draw, don't you?
It's huge.
Unless you're Hull FC. But no, you do. You want the home draw. You're right. But players will always want to win as many trophies as they can, and to be labelled as the most consistent team, it's the hardest trophy really to win.
We should make more
it really is, but we don't. But you're right. The next best thing is obviously you've just got to be in that top 2. Statistically, those teams that are there end up at the big dance, which is what everyone wants to be.
A huge game again. Lee Leopards hockey are just. We're at that point of the season now where enough has gone and there's still enough in front of us for every game to be really significant. This one writes itself. You don't really need to introduce it.
No, mouth-watering clash coming up. Lee, they've not played at home for quite a while, and it was an absolutely incredible experience for all the fans last weekend, and I think this weekend's going to be the same. You want to see your team against the best, and Hull KR have been the benchmark all year, and coming off a loss, so it's a really tough one to pick. I'm going to go for a Lee win. Actually, I'm going to go with an upset.
And fascinating this one. For all the waxing miracle about Hull KR that we've done, and they have been absolutely superb. We've not seen them yet really be able to respond after being punched in the nose, and that's what they've got to do this weekend.
They have to. It's very rare, Lewis, that you see champion sides lose 2 games in a row. It doesn't usually happen, and this is a great game, isn't it, in the making, without doubt. Lee bounced into that full of confidence at home again. and Hull KR, yeah, I just think the way that Willie Peters has got hold of that group, I just think he won't accept what happened in that second half. You know, they were up 8-0 and basically the game just flipped on its head. They let themselves down in terms of how they went about the process, and the Rhinos were good enough to not only just step through the door but knock it straight down. And I think Willie Peters will be challenging his men in what is a massive game this weekend.
I can't wait for that one. It's huge. It's a really good weekend. Warrington, Catalans, for very different reasons. Moz is fascinating as well.
Yeah. Warrington, you know, we've spoke about getting the win, but being very disappointed with the performance. Catalans' form's not great. However, they did do a job a couple of weeks ago on Huddersfield at home. I think it depends on the weather in south of France. It was close to 40 degrees that day, and obviously had a huge effect on the Giants. But the Catalan boys are used to it. So if the weather's incredibly hot, I think Catalans will fancy this one. But if Warrington are going to have any chance of doing anything this year in the playoffs, you know, making these grand finals with a fantastic squad they've got to be beating teams like Catalan Dragons, home or away. So it's a massive game for Warrington and for Sam Burgess. So I think they'll go there. I think they'll be very much improved. I think Warrington will go and get the job done.
We're running out of time, so I will move on to the final game of the weekend. And another one that's very interesting, Kyle, really for all the wrong reasons, but Salford versus Castleford feels very different to probably if we were having this conversation even 7 days ago.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Look, I'm gonna throw it out there. I think Salford get a win. I think, you know, it would be great for them in terms of their efforts for staying in the fight. They've been bashed from pillar to post, you know, largely not through any of the players' own doing whatsoever, but they've managed to stick together, still turn out, and I think it would be great for the club and all those fans who have stuck by them if they can get a win against a very wounded Castleford. You know, if that hadn't have happened 7 days ago, I probably wouldn't be saying it. But so often we see when a coach gets sacked or moved on, it can galvanise that group. It just depends how far that's gone. But I think Salford will be bouncing into this one.
I'll tell you what, Moz, if he's right, I'll meet you in the John Gilbert Sunday night. We'll celebrate It would be, in what's been a torrid season for Salford, it would be a lovely moment.
It would, yeah. Totally agree with you, Lewis. But yeah, I agree with Kyle. When a coach does get asked to move on, it can go one way or the other. Players can either rise or they can go into the shell. So Salford fans will be hoping it's the latter. But if the effort's there like it was against Warrington, you know, there's no substitute for effort and endeavour. So they'll give it a go. They'll give themselves a chance, I'm sure. Gents,
absolute pleasure as always. A season that keeps on producing the goods throws up another 6 games, all full of intrigue, and it is just that time of year now, isn't it, where that little prickle of the playoffs and the grand final just starts to loom a little bit larger. All gets very interesting. Next week we will be back again. We could have something a little bit special up our sleeves. We'll have those details for you very, very soon. But we will see you next Wednesday for more from The Last Tackle.
This is my time.